Hello and welcome back everyone. Now that we have completed the ServiceNow configurations needed by the ITSM 8.2 plugin, we can continue with the actual plugin configurations and actually use the ITSM 8.2 plugin so we can, like we mentioned at the beginning of this video series, so we can share, consume, and manage the released vRealize catalog items in the ServiceNow platform. Therefore, in this section, we will look at setting up the integration user needed for the vRealize 8.2 integration, set up the API token for the vRealize Cloud integration, register vRealize Automation 8.2, and register vRealize Automation Cloud. As you can see, we're targeting both platforms, on-prem and SaaS. At the end of this, we'll create entitlement so we can entitle certain users or group to specific projects and specific item catalogs within vRealize. Starting with setting up the integration user for vRealize 8.1 or 8.2. First, you must set up an integration user in vRealize Automation. This is the user that will actually connect the ITSM 8.2 application to vRealize Automation instance using the credential of this user. This user must have specific roles in vRealize Automation and specifically on-prem version. We will see later what is the requirement for the vRealize Cloud integration. But specifically for vRealize Automation on-prem, we require the service broker administrator, and we require the organization owner. So as you can see in the screenshot below, we have here in the identity and access management within our cloud service portal, I've created an account called ServiceNow, and I have provided him with the service broker administrator role, and I also made him an organization owner. The third role required is on the project side. Now, this is where you decide what project you want to import into ServiceNow. So to do that, what you need to do is to make sure that that same ServiceNow account is added as a project administrator in all the projects that you're intending to import into ServiceNow. Now, a couple of things here to mention is that in the vRealize Automation, the request and corresponding deployments will display as that user, as the integration user. That user is going to be the owner for all the deployments. So when you're looking natively in vRealize Automation, you will know which deployment came from users and which deployment came through the ServiceNow integration. On the ServiceNow side, on the other hand, these requests and corresponding deployments will display the ServiceNow native user who actually initiated the request. Here's my ServiceNow account, and I'm giving him the administrator role in the project VMware Lab, as you can see in the screenshot. Now, a pro tip for everybody here: if you do want to create a day 2 action policy for the integration user, you can, and really this policy can be used to limit the day 2 action for that integration user. This is only if this is the use case that you're after. The integration user have to be added to the deployment criteria when you're creating a policy, using that the created by condition to be able to limit the policy only to that integration user. I hope that's clear. It's not mandatory. This is the pro tip is completely optional. Now, on the vRealize Cloud side of things, this is where we don't have a user, but we have to work with what we call the refresh token or the API token. The refresh key or the API token is required to register the VMware vRealize Automation ITSM application or plugin. You heard me refer to it either by application or plugin, and we need to register that with your instance of vRealize Automation Cloud, which is the SaaS form factor of vRealize Automation. This refresh key must have also certain roles. These roles are the service broker, and the organization owner. You can see here in the screenshot when I'm about to define the scopes for this API token that I'm generating, I make sure that both the organization owner and the service broker administrator role granted to the API token. Now, if you don't know how to generate a refresh key, I will post in the description below the link to the documentation for the generating a cloud services platform API token in terms of going through the steps needed to create this API token. Once the roles are done defined, you simply hit generate and it will generate the API token for you. Now, in terms of the actual registration, once we have these two prerequisites created and dealt with, we can register the ITSM application with both vRealize on-prem 8.1 or 8.2 or vRealize Automation Cloud. Specifically now, we're going to be talking about registering the vRealize Automation 8.1 or 8.2. So to establish the connection between vRealize on-prem and the ITSM application, the ServiceNow administrator must register, or the catalog admin administrator of the ITSM application must register the vRealize Automation on-prem instance. Procedures is really straightforward. So we are going to log into ServiceNow as the system administrator or the VMware vRealize Automation ITSM application admin user. On the left pane in the search field, simply search for vRealize Automation. And then in the menu, you want to select Manage Endpoints and then hit New. And this is to create a new endpoint. When you're creating the endpoint, you have to select the endpoint type. So because we're doing this and we want to, and the focus here is that we want to register a vRealize Automation 8.1 or 8.2 on-prem, we make sure that we select the vRealize Automation VRA type endpoint. We're going to give it a name. This name could be anything that you want. Could be a name that represents the data center, or could be the actual name of the appliance. As you can see, that's what I used. Because I'm trying to integrate into the on-prem, I have to mention what mid server I'm going to be using to proxy the requests to VRA. So this is the VMware Lab-mid that we configured, and we, as we talked previously, that it's one of the prerequisites to be able to communicate to your on-prem version of VRA. Make sure it's active. You want to mention the host name so we can direct the API calls to the FQDN of the appliance. So you can see here, mine is https management-vra02.vmwarelab.local, and then use the ServiceNow user integration that I have granted the required privileges that we just talked about a second ago. Once I'm ready, I can go ahead, validate, and save that to finish the registration process. Of course, if you have more than one on-prem instance that you want to register with the ITSM application, you can go ahead and repeat those same steps to register any additional vRealize 8.1 or 8.2 endpoints. On the registration of the vRealize Automation Cloud, it's a lot more easier. All we need, like we mentioned, is that API token, and there's no need for any mid server because we're going from SaaS to SaaS. So you can register the ITSM application with the vRealize Automation Cloud version. And to establish that connection between the two, the ServiceNow system administrator or the ITSM catalog admin register the application or the ITSM application to the vRealize Automation Cloud instance. And the procedure, again, you have to log in as the system administrator or the vRealize administration automation ITSM admin, and then search for vRealize Automation. In the search field, go to Manage Endpoints again, hit New. This time we will select the vRealize Automation Cloud VRA Cloud endpoint type, give it a name, again, representing that instance of vRealize, and then the base URL usually is auto-populated for you. You don't have to type anything there, and then simply paste the refresh key that was generated in the previous slides. Once you're done, make sure it's active, and then hit validate and save to complete the registration. You can see here now that I've added those two management points, I have both listed here. You got vRealize 02-02 and my vRealize Cloud. They're both active, and then and when these endpoints was created, and created by who. All right, so we're back to our developer instance in ServiceNow, and we're going to register the two types of vRealize automation instances, the 8.2 on-prem in our case here in this demo, and the vRealize Cloud instance. So first thing, I'm logged in here as the system administrator. I can actually do that from here if I wanted to. The system administrator has access to all the roles, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to impersonate the ITSM admin. So I'm logged in as the ITSM admin. This is the user that I granted the 4 different roles to make this user or give it the ability to configure the ITSM application. So in the last previous videos, we've added everything into the favorites. So if I click on my favorites, I can access the menu. If you missed that video, go ahead in the video list and watch the earlier parts of this multi-part video series. All right, so we're in the vRealize automation menu. We can either search for it in the filter navigator if you haven't done so, and then add it to your favorites. That's what That's what I have done here. I'm going to click on the manage endpoints, and I'm going to be represented by the manage endpoint page. Click new, and this is first where I'm going to go in and register first the vRealize on-prem. You can see here there's 2 types of endpoints. So the on-prem represented by the vRealize automation and just simply vRealize, and then vRealize automation cloud, which is simply vRealize cloud. So I'm going to make sure that I select the on-prem version here. I'm going to give it a name. You can give it really anything here. My appliance in my home lab is called management vRealize-02, and this is what I'm giving it. This is what the name that I'm going to just simply provide it. I'm going to click on my mid server again, because I'm trying to connect from the SaaS ServiceNow instance that I have here and I'm working with to the on-prem instance. I got to proxy all the requests via the mid server that we've talked about in previous videos. So I'm going to select that as the proxy to those calls that I'm going to make from ServiceNow to vRealize. Make sure the checkbox active is, and then for the host URL, I can simply go in and go into my vRealize instance on-prem and simply copy the URL for my vRealize instance and simply paste it in the host URL. And if you guys remember, I've already created a local account on vRealize. This can be an admin account as long as you grant it the required roles that we've talked about. So ServiceNow, and I'm gonna put the password that I've assigned it, and simply hit validate and save. That's going to start the import of the various constructs, and you can see here we got redirected to the job queues page. The job queue page can be actually accessed from the advanced menu within the vRealize automation menu, and you can go to job queues directly. You want to make sure that this, you can see here I have 15 records, and you can see everything is being imported right now. Things like catalog, resources, import catalog, all these. And if I keep refreshing, these records is going to increase to include all the objects that's coming from that instance until they are fully imported. And this is just to make sure that everything got imported. And you can see now I have no records to display, which means the import operation of the instance was successful. And if you want to go and take a look at if there's any logs under the advanced menu, go to the system logs and make sure, for example, that there's no logs, errors or whatsoever that occurred within the import. Now we're going to go back to the manage endpoints and add the vRA cloud instance that I have access to. So here I'm going to get back to hit new, and I'm going to go to the vRA cloud, and simply I'm going to call this my vRA cloud. And you can see the base URL is really auto-populated for you. This is the API, the main API in the Americas. If you want the Australia or the European instances, you can actually select that here. But I'm in Canada, so I'm going to use the default, which is in the Americas. I'm going to paste my refresh key in the refresh key field. I'm going to simply hit validate and save. If everything is successful, you will see that the registration and the import is in progress. Again, we're back to the job queues, and this is going to show us, for example, what's currently being imported from the vRA cloud instance that I just, and you can see it was super fast. I do have less things on the ITSM on the vRA cloud instance versus the on-prem, and you can see now the import is completed. Now we're ready to create the entitlements. The ServiceNow System Administrator or the VMware vRealize Automation ITSM Application Admin can view the vRealize Automation projects and catalog items. Administrators are required to create entitlements for projects, catalog items, and day 2 actions and assign them to the native ServiceNow users. The procedure here is that we log in as the ServiceNow System Administrator or the ITSM admin. In the search field, I can either type vRealize Automation or go to the favorites, and within the menu, I'm simply going to click on Manage Entitlement and then hit New to create a new entitlement. This is your opportunity here to create an entitlement for a single user or a group of users, and assign them to what instances of vRA you want them to access catalog items from, and what day 2 actions you want them to be able to perform on those resources. So to do that, you're going to be presented by the managed entitlement. When you're trying to create a new entitlement, you're going to provide a name first of all. You can see here I gave it just simply vRA ITSM user, since my user that I'm using for this demonstration called ITSM user. You can provide a description if you want to. Select the endpoint that you want to create the entitlement for. One important note here: when you're creating an entitlement, it's a one-to-one mapping. You cannot create an entitlement and include more than one endpoint. So for every type of endpoint or instance of that endpoint, you need to create a separate entitlement. Once I select the endpoint that I'm trying to target here, I can select the project that I want this user to have access to, and then simply select the catalog items that I want to also entitle to this user within this entitlement that I'm creating. Once I'm done here, I'm going to add all the day 2 actions on the deployment level. This is why this is called deployment actions. So you can see I've selected all 5. And then on the machine actions, I go ahead also and select all the entitled or the actions that I want to entitle this ITSM user within, again, the entitlement that I'm trying to create. And in here, you can see that I have added this user. I could have, I'm able to add groups of user. If you're already well established with your ServiceNow instance and you already have groups that represents line of businesses within your organization, you can obviously use groups instead of having to manage individual users like we're doing here just for the sake of the demo. Once you're ready, you hit submit, and that basically creates the entitlement. And for the vRA cloud, of course, like I mentioned, the only difference here is we're going to repeat the same process, but this time from an endpoint perspective, I'm going to select the vRA cloud, and then I'm going to select the project I want to entitle the ITSM user again. So this is the same user that we just entitled to the vRA on-prem endpoint, but this time I am giving him I'm creating another entitlement so he can access the open card demo blueprint, for example, that's coming from the vRA cloud side. Make sure it's active, and again, provide both the deployment and the machine actions that you want to grant him. Add the user to the entitled user, and again, this can be a group, and simply hit submit. Okay, so we're back to our developer instance, so we can create entitlements. What we're going to do here is create entitlement for the same user. The user name is ITSM_user. So again, I'm logged in here as the ITSM admin, which is the admin that has the administrative privileges to make any configuration and be able to actually create entitlements. Within my favorites menu here, I'm going to go down the vRealize automation menu and click on manage entitlements. This is here where you see now I don't have any entitlements created since this is a brand new instance. So I'm going to click new. And be very descriptive in terms, when you're creating an entitlement, you want like a name that actually meaningful, so you can identify what type of entitlement am I creating. First of all, I want to create an entitlement that is for the on-prem vRA. So I'm going to simply say vRA. And you can, if you have more than one instance on-prem, you can distinguish that by actually putting the FQDN or the vRA or whatever that vRA, a local instance or on-prem instance, represents in your data center. Next, the user that I'm giving entitlement to is the ITSM user. So we might as well put that here, and then basically I'm saying vRA ITSM user entitlement. Okay. Again, you can provide description and use this block to add more details if you want to. And here, because I'm creating this entitlement, I need to, for vRA on-prem, I need to select my endpoint. So we've defined two endpoints. The vRA-02 is the on-prem and the vRA cloud is the SaaS. So I'm going to select my on-prem instance, and automatically you can see project now shows up on the entitlement record. Here I'm going to select the padlock and click the search. I only have one project that that exists today on this specific instance called VMware Lab. And by the way, this is the same project, also the same name that exists in my vRA Cloud instance as well, so you don't get confused. Here I'm going to add all the projects, for example, that I want to entitle this user to. One thing here to note is that even though, remember that the entitlement that we're using, it's native to ServiceNow and has nothing to do with vRA. Everything that we're sending via vRA is either via the integration user or the API token, depending on the instance that you're integrating with. So this is completely that where you're managing basically this entitlement within ServiceNow natively. So I'm going to select the VMware Lab where I want to provide access to, so I can have access to the catalog items that are available on this instance. You can see here I have 5 different catalog items that I may be able to entitle to the user, but I'm only going to go in and select the cloud agnostic blueprint. I just want to give him access to one blueprint, for example. Make sure the active checkbox is checked, and then on the deployment action, this is basically to explain this really in a very simple. Think of the deployment as a container, and all the machines within the deployment are the machine actions. So this is on the container level, so the deployment, which is that may have one or more machines, of course, depending on the type of deployment or the type of blueprint that you're going to be requesting. If you have a deployment that is multi-tier application and you have more than one machine within one deployment, the deployment action is actually the deployment on the deployment level. So if I destroy the deployment, obviously is going to destroy all the machines within that deployment. So here, there's no other way to say this, but there is no select all and add those actions into the menu. So if I want to select all the D2 actions on the deployment level, I will have to go in, either type them here or basically go in back to the menu and select them one by one. So power off, delete, where we are, change lease, and then power on. The deployment, I move on to the machine actions, and this is where I can go in and basically click on the search and the magnifying glass, and you can see the day 2 action entitlements is a lot longer. There's 17 different actions, so I'm going to actually go in and go one by one, add disk, power on, suspend, just keep track of what you're adding, create snapshot, resize. I'm just gonna add them all. We went to restart, and resize boot disk, resize disk, and shutdown, revert to snapshot, reset, delete a machine, delete a snapshot on the machine, reboot, and the last two, remove disk and power off. Okay, so I've added all 17 here, and then now is the time. Again, we said that we're creating this entitlement for ITSM user on the vRealize on-prem. So under the entitled user, I click the padlock here, and I can simply here search for my user, ITSM, and ITSM user I'm adding here. Of course, I have the ability to add a group instead of entitling individual users within my entitlement. Once I'm ready, I'm going to hit submit. And you can see here my entitlement is there. From the name, I can clearly see that this is for vRealize on-prem, and the user entitlement is specifically for ITSM user. This is the endpoint that this is was created for, the entitlement that the endpoint was created for. And then if it's active or disabled, you can always at any time go in and edit that and deactivate the entitlement for whatever reason you want. Now let's go ahead and create another entitlement for the same user, but for the vRealize Cloud instance. So here, again, I'm going to be very descriptive. So I'm going to type in vRealize Cloud, and the user that I'm entitling is the ITSM_user. And this is my entitlement, or the entitlement that I am currently creating. Add more details in the description if you would like to. And from an endpoint perspective, obviously I'm going to create or select the vRealize Cloud instance. Once I have access, once I made my selection to the endpoint, again, same thing, go to the project. And here I have more than one project that I can or able to basically entitle the user to, but I'm going to only select the VMware Lab project. And then once that's selected, I'm going to go to the catalog items. Again, you have various blueprints available in that vRealize Cloud instance. I'm only going to select the OpenCard demo blueprint, for example, for this specific user, and then make sure it's active. And I'm going to repeat the same process that we did previously. Select all the deployment actions, which I'm going to select all of them, and all the machine actions, and then entitle the user. So let's do this really quick. Here you go. So we finished the deployment actions and the machine actions like we did in the when we created the previous entitlement, and I made sure that the ITSM user is added in the entitled user section, and I'm going to hit submit. Now that I finished, you can see both the entitlement for the same user, one on the vRealize Cloud endpoint and one on the management or the on-prem version of vRealize endpoint, and both are active. And the entitled users here are the ITSM user and for the VMware Lab project in each of those instances.